how did you look at now in retrospect the Husky Harris run that he has, and how that sort of it's something that I think a lot of the biggest successes in pro wrestling have is some failure that becomes this chip on their shoulder. And this was one where I don't think you even necessarily like label this like a failure on his part. I think the frustration is right out of the gate, there was so little upside to a guy named Husky Harris that they even noticed the fact that, this guy was pretty conscious of his weight and being given this name. And it's something that I think often is, we sort of look at it in terms of females being under a spotlight for their look. And, you see egregious things like Piggy James, but there's plenty of males that have, this is a cosmetic industry, and there's going to be male talent that are extremely critical of their look and subconscious of how they look, what their weight is. And here you are being given the name Husky Harris. Already that's playing a mind fuck with you. And this was, a blip in his career, but it did seem like this disastrous character was at least the fuel for what would evolve into the Bray Wyatt character several years later.
Yeah. I see Husky Harris, and I remember my impressions, if any, of Husky Harris at the time watching those season 2 of NXT, I believe.
Yes.
And I'm amazed that at the transformation of Husky Harris into Bray Wyatt, which seemed almost overnight at the time, but also almost like, oh, man, in a way kind of sad that this guy almost, like, this could have been the end of his WWE story. He could have just been released after Husky Harris didn't work out, and then we would have never really had anything that followed this. And it also makes me wonder, what if within what's that dude's name? Mustache. Who am I thinking about?
Eli Cottonwood.
What if within Eli Cottonwood was this genius that just never got, like, this sort of like watering to blossom into maybe another?
I guarantee you there, like, everyone looks at how close John Cena was to being cut, and boy did they avoid one. How many I'm not saying John Cena's, but close to it. I guarantee you there were a handful of those people that were cut that never realized their potential and probably never did elsewhere. Ones that got out of the industry, ones that just never really clicked elsewhere. I am certain that along the way, there are plenty of people that were let go that could have been. I think like the 2000s and 2010s, I think it probably littered with potential that was squandered either on screen or didn't even get the opportunity to get to Raw or SmackDown.
It really does actually kind of make me a bit angry that, especially during that game show NXT, especially the women's season after this, where they just completely fucked with and squandered so many of these, like, obviously you have to be incredibly talented just to even get a look, much less, a developmental contract from the WWE. The games that they were playing, literally, with all of these careers, just to kind of either, I don't know, with some sort of like initiation, like, bullshit. We're going to embarrass these people to see which ones we could weed out on live on TV, so that the ones that stick around, we can do whatever we want with. It's just ridiculous. I can't believe, like, guys like that were subjected to this. And a Husky Harris, a Wyndham Rotundo, could have very well been one of those guys that just would have quit, or I don't know, would have just not found anything. Not found a second chance. But anyway, so you had Lebec saying, like, he saw something within this guy that didn't feel like this was, like, he was very kind. He said, like, I didn't think it was a good fit. I didn't think this Husky Harris character was a good fit for him. I mean, that was, just a very mild way of saying, like, he had no character, really. It sucked. So went down to FCW, and just, like, who could have expected the next iteration, like, again, almost overnight, he came up with, like, what felt like a very, very complete character with its own world, its own type of speaking pattern. And that was, of course, the introduction of Bray Wyatt.
Yeah, and we got some clips from the promo classes and him, getting compliments from Dusty Rhodes and
basing it off of Cape Fear was a major influence. Waylon Mercy was another major influence. Also, the name comes from, we learned, childhood friend named Bray Wyatt, who got into an accident and therefore couldn't feel pain in his head. And so he would use his head to like headbutt everything or smash things on his head.
It sounds like a Marvel origin story.
Get into a car accident and just don't feel anything in your head. Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was interesting, as was when they were talking about the various puppets for the Firefly Funhouse, and obviously Huskus representing Husky Harris. I had never heard like the analogy of Rambling Rabbit being connected to Bray Wyatt's rambling promos. That was a criticism of some of his promos. And then, obviously Mercy the Buzzard connecting to Waylon Mercy, and then Abby being the imaginary sister. But the Rambling Rabbit one, that was a detail I was not, didn't have that connection.
I mean, showed you, he had a very, I think, self-aware understanding of how the audience perceived him, for all the good and also all the faults, and the rambling promos were certainly one of them. Though I have no doubt they made complete sense in his mind. I think he was expecting a level of detail and attention from the audience that I would say the vast majority just weren't used to, first of all, in professional wrestling, nor just like willing to give. And that's not, I think that's more of a fault of honestly maybe the creator not really understanding the platform. Pro wrestling is not really the type of place where people will transcribe your words and then try to analyze them week after week. Maybe eventually at some point it would get there. Certainly, like he found a way to kind of reach that depth visually through the White Rabbit sort of Easter egg hunts, but just through promos, it was, I would say, kind of maybe unsuccessful, but interesting and sounded cool as hell.
What if, as we're playing this game, the winner of season 2 of NXT had also gone on to create a character like this, or been part of the Wyatt family? Damn, got some buzzards. All the fireflies.
I think Caval would have been an excellent Wyatt family member.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, no, like we talk about that, like that's a very
dude. He was absolutely squandered. Like he was like just a total. Like it felt like this guy was here pretty much to just be our punching bag, like Daniel Bryan in season 1. Like it was just to mock an aspect of the industry, and we're gonna put this guy with Lay Cool, and this guy was done. He was like, Caval. I mean, it was just. I feel season 2 does it. Like if we were to go back and watch some of the season 2 stuff, I think it was even worse than the season 1 stuff.
Right? Was that Eli Cottonwood?
Cottonwood was season 2, as I recall. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And you probably had full on heel Michael Cole throughout those seasons as well.
Yeah, that was,
and just the announcers were almost like instructed to not give a shit, like especially during the women's season, where like it was just kind of Cole and like Matthews just kind of fucking around on commentary, not taking anything seriously. And just in
season
hindsight,
2 was Caval, Michael McGillicuddy, Alex Riley, Husky Harris, Percy Watson, Lucky Cannon, your pick that year, Eli Cottonwood with his coach John Morrison, and Titus O'Neil.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So Titus O'Neil might have been the biggest beneficiary of that particular season.
It's just it's so unfortunate. Now let's just kind of suggest, like, if Husky Harris aside, right?
Yeah, I was saying like pre-Bray Wyatt. Yes.
Now, if all those talents came up through maybe the current iteration of NXT, where they seem to be very sort of serious about trying to make sure everybody gets a chance at success, how different would these careers have turned out? I mean, some would say maybe not that different, like there's always the belief that like the cream rises to the top, and how much cream was it within that pack, I suppose. But still, like it hardly ever felt productive to me, especially when you're putting that sort of television on, like these sort of first impressions on TV.
Eli Cottonwood requested and was granted his release in June of 2012. After wrestling, Cottonwood owned a yoga studio in Las Vegas called Kip's Life Flip from 16 to 18, and then co-owned the Florida Hardcore Wrestling promotion from 2016 to 2017.
So there you go. Yeah, so I mean, the documentary just kind of gives us, more of like your templative WWE look at a wrestling person's career growing up here. What it did manage to convey to me, obviously through the use of Bo Dallas as sort of like the framework of this entire documentary. But it was also through interviews with his sister, Micah Taylor, as well as his mother, that I think really kind of spoke to me. Just how close of a relationship he had with his siblings. Like they talked about how he made it to like a D1 football team, which I